So it's 8:30. How this is going to work, I'm just going to give you a quick explanation of how to ask questions and how to be interactive this evening. And we're actually going to be doing this in two ways. So we're going to be live streaming on Facebook as well. So people in our public group are going to be able to watch. And then we have all of you who are registered here with us tonight. So a quick introduction. I am not a dad. I am a single mom though, so I do double duty. And I'm going to be playing a very low-key role this evening. My name's Valerie House. I am the Community Engagement Liaison for Adopt4Life. And I'm going to be hosting this webinar, which will be presented by Carrol, who's on our mental health committee, and he is an adoptive dad. So there's two ways to join us, Facebook Live and Zoom. If you are live streaming on Facebook, you can leave a comment and we're going to keep an eye on the questions. And if you're watching us on Zoom, there's two ways to communicate. So you can either go down to the bottom of their screen and you'll see a little speech bubble with 3 dots, the chat box. And you can go into the chat and you can choose whether to identify yourself or whether to be anonymous using the drop-down menu. And then you can pose your question so that either everyone can see it, all the panelists and attendees, or just the panelists can see. Another way that you can ask a question is with the Q&A, which is just a little bit further over to the left beside participants. And in the Q&A, I'm just going to keep an eye on the questions coming in. If there's any major questions, I'm going to save them for the end with Rick. But we want to keep this as interactive as possible. So I will be occasionally interrupting, putting a hand up and getting Rick's attention so that he can answer. If there's anything in the presentation that Rick has to say that really resonates for you, or you want to share something from your own experience, please feel free. Just leave us a message in the chat box and we'll be paying attention throughout the next hour. And that's about it. So I'm gonna get the recording started.
Okay.
And we're gonna go live on Facebook.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for making the time in your evenings and calendars to join us. I know everybody's busy and everybody's got lots of things going on, but this is always a great opportunity to be able to connect like this and really learn from each other. I'll give you a quick introduction just as to why I'm here. Like Valerie said, I serve on the mental health committee. I've been doing that for the last number of years here at Adopt4Life. But I'm a youth and family counselor, and really I've been working with students in a number of different jobs and roles for about 20 years. I just turned 40 this year. So I guess I've been working, I think I graduated when I was 22, so I've been working for 18 years. And about 10 years ago, I completed my master's in counseling in counseling and psychology, and with a specific focus on youth and adolescents and families. So I've lots of experience in that world professionally. And for the last 9 years, we adopted our daughter 9 years ago when she was 5, and she is just on her way. She's just heading into high school. I'll show you a quick, a quick picture there. That's us. That was us at actually at our church. We had a Father's Day thing, and we all got to sit on a motorcycle with Dad's root beer. So that was kind of fun yesterday. So anyway, that's who I am. That's why I'm here. And the reason why we're here tonight is really to talk about how we bond and how we attach, and the differences between bonding and attachment, and what we can do to support that process, and really some of the things that we don't really have as much control over when it comes to bonding and attachments. And I'm going to be speaking specifically from my research and experience as a father, but obviously we've got lots of moms here too, and it isn't really specific to any gender. This is really specific to parents and kids attaching, and what the research says and what our experience says. So just like Valerie said, if there's any time that you want to stop and ask a question, please do, and we can address it. And if it's something that I feel like, you know what, let's just keep going, and we're going to get to that a little bit later, or maybe we can save it for the end because it'll take us in a way that we didn't necessarily want to go, then I can just say that. But really the point is that we learn from each other, and that everyone who's here gets the most out of their experience tonight. So if you do have a relevant comment or question, please do ask, and we'll pause and we will address that. And our goal is to be about an hour. So we finish the presentation portion around 9:30, and then I'm happy to stay online for as long as people have questions and comments, and we can continue the chat. So any questions before we even get going? I know Valerie had already asked that, but I just wanted to make sure. If you had any questions, then please feel free to type it in there. But we're going to look at the difference between what is bonding and what is attachment. And I know we've probably have all heard these terms. Some of us may have more familiarity with them than others. Maybe we kind of use them simultaneously. But really they do play two different roles, and it'll be the main portion of what we want to look at this evening is the difference between them, and really how they play into each other. That bonding really is the emotions and the experience that people share together, that we have with anyone, that we create some kind of connection with. So we have some kind of experience, is a positive experience, and we have these emotions, and we have this connection. We have this bond. I have all kinds of bonds with people that I have no maybe specific attachment relationship with, and it may or may not affect my person's attachment as they develop. But attachment is the sense of stability that a person gets from having at least one physical and emotional connection with a caregiver, and it begins at birth, and it moves up all through early childhood and into adolescence. That it builds the kind of attachment, but what it relates to is more our sense of security and safety. And if there's a secure attachment, well, it's the springboard for a child's development. And it's the stable piece of their lives for which they begin to view the world. And when life gets rocky, well, they know that they have this sense that things will be safe, things will be secure, and I know that there's somebody here to care for me. Bonding can play into that, and it's great to have bonds, great to have bonding experiences, and actually does help attachments, but they don't necessarily, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 when it comes to, if I have enough bonding experience, my attachment will get to a secure place. So it can help, but it doesn't necessarily lead to it. And vice versa, a child with a fearful or a dismissive attachment might prove to make bonding very challenging for a parent or caregiver, and it's difficult in those kinds of relationships. So when we put it into this kind of context, we understand parents. We come into parenthood regardless of what age and stage and how we do it. We absolutely put everything on hold, and we rearrange our lives for our kids, because we understand the gravity of what we're taking on, and we just want to see our kids loved and thrive, and we just want to share life together. And we would expect that we would have the same kind of love and connection coming both ways. And so we want to have all these bonding experiences that we dream about, that we've thought about, that we've planned. But when we're met with resistance or hesitancy, and sometimes even anger, or there's some kind of outlashes, we start to have this thought, well, what could I have done differently? What did I do wrong? And as bonding and attachment have similarities, they do have their own unique pieces. So our goal isn't to solve every problem tonight, but our goal is to get a better understanding of what we're experiencing, what I've experienced, what you've experienced, and make a little sense about why we're feeling the way that we feel when we go through these kinds of experiences. And did I see a question pop up there, Valerie, in the Q&A? Okay, no, it's all right. Okay, well, we might not be able to get to that one right now. So I'm just gonna pause on that one. So we're gonna go through 3 different categories tonight, and the first one here is this: that building. We need to remember that building an attachment is a shared responsibility. That it would be something that we would love to have some measure of control over, but we may not have the same kind of control that we would imagine that we would have. So there are 4 basic kinds of attachment, and depending on the attachments made or not made when a child was very early, or interruptions in care and security. Primarily, we start to look at these under the age of 3. We can see different attachments made with kids and the world, and really kids and their caregivers. The thing that I always like to remind people is that it's an attachment theory. So it isn't as same as a broken arm. We can't put an X-ray up and say, well, this child is functioning this way, this is functioning this way, and we can see that, we can clearly diagnose it. It is a theory that we see norms and we see generalities, but we don't necessarily, we aren't able to make definitive diagnosis. So we just have to do our best at recognizing them, seeing what the research says, seeing what we're experiencing, and then responding, reacting in the appropriate way. Seeing how I'm going to take this from the father's perspective, men seem to typically like to be more literal thinkers. We like cause and reaction. And we would like to say, well, if I see A, B, and C, then I know that it must be D. And we really can't diagnose attachment this way. It really does have to be an understanding that it could be a little fluid. It could develop over time, and we may take pieces from one kind of attachment, and they could be part of another kind of attachment. So it's very important to have this understanding as we parent, because it is a fluid thing, and it isn't as definitive as maybe it would be nice if it was definitive. I like to, for those of you who are like who think that way or organize that way, you like to be able to say, well, I know it, this is the way that one will react, this is the way that another child will react. In fact, that was one of the questions that popped up that said we couldn't really get to it right now, but to dig deep. But obviously different kids, even if they experience the exact same thing when they were young, their attachments and the way that they navigate relationships might be totally different. And there's an absolute mix of things going on: personality, the way that they experience it, the way that they experience things now today. So we do need to have that kind of understanding. And so then when it comes to understanding how our kids are going to react, the thing is that when everything's going smooth, typically when it's fun and there's no pressure, everything seems good. But we know that there are triggers that each one of our kids would have, and I just want you to think for a moment: what are some of the triggers that your kids have? I know I can list off 2 or 3, and just for her privacy's sake, I won't say anything. But I know that there are a few triggers that, when this happens, I know. Father's Day, yeah. Somebody just said Father's Day was hard for us. Absolutely. When holidays, transitions, and we have a few specific holidays around our house that we know it's going to be difficult every year. We're in year 9, and we just know we have to be prepared when that time of year comes. So absolutely, Father's Day can be a big trigger. And so we get this understanding in our mind. I want to create a great bonding experience around Father's Day. Let's just use that as an example. And you've probably experienced a time when you've planned something fun, and you've built it up in your mind that we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have all these great bonding times together, and then that's going to help our attachment. And then, as happens so many times, it doesn't really play out as we would imagine it to, and it turns into a day of conflict, or it turns into a day of frustration, or however it plays out in your world. And we get to the end of the day and we go, oh my goodness, why did I even think that it would go differently? Or why did I build it up this way? Or what did I do wrong? Maybe I could have tweaked something like that. But we probably, and these are all normal questions, but we may have started with the wrong intent. if we assume that the bonding experience is the thing that's and if I have this great bond, then my attachment will change, then we may have started out with an incorrect motive, an incorrect way of navigating that out. Bonding has some effect on attachment, but remember, it's not 1 + 1 = 2 in that way. So I want to use the example of, let's say we were planning a Father's Day trip to the Blue Jays game. And let's just use an example of what could be happening in the lives of 4 different kids. So let's go with secure attachment. And I'm going to put up a little graph here in front of us that shows the 4 different categories that we would typically use to describe a child's attachment, where there's secure, anxious, avoidant, or fearful. And you may have also heard the words ambivalent or disorganized attachment instead of avoidant and fearful. But so lots of words we use there. But in the top left corner there, the secure attachment, the child who's securely attached trusts that their needs will be met, and they know that even when there's a difficult experience that comes up or a frustrating experience, that they know that their needs are going to be met. So I love my dad loves me, this is a day that we can celebrate my dad, and there will be other days for me, there'll be other experiences for me, even though baseball is boring and I'm gonna have to sit there for 3 hours, I don't really want to be there, and even though I asked for the treat and I didn't get the treat that I wanted, I complain a little, but I still have some fun, and it's a good experience, and we can go home at the end of the day. That's a typical experience of a securely attached child going to an experience that wasn't 100% the way that they imagined that it would be. Didn't get the treat, complained, baseball is boring, but I'm okay, we'll get through this, and we had some kind of we had some kind of experience. So now let's move on to the avoidant attachment. The avoidant attached child subconsciously believes that there's probably times when my needs are not going to be met, and they've had that experience reinforced to them at different phases of their development, and some of you were mentioning crowded places, end of school, things like that, where there's some unknown, where there's some added pressures, and there is this subconscious feeling that not only my needs might not be met, there's really a belief that they're not going to be met. There's this underlying feeling all the time of something's not going to be met. And so I love my dad, but I don't love this. I don't love what I'm experiencing right now. And I know that there are times when my needs are not going to be met. So I need to make sure that I advocate for my needs. And I use that term very generally, advocate. What does it look like when your kids advocate for their needs? Does it look like yelling? Does it look like arguing? Does it look like physical outbursts? That they begin to advocate for something that they feel they want, and they need to let us know that something's not working for them. So let's go back to the baseball game experience. Something's not working. I don't really want to go to the baseball game. This isn't what I want to do. I'm out, and I may not have another opportunity to get something that I want. So I don't really care what's going on with you. I'm going to make sure that I deal with that I deal with what I need to get. And then all of a sudden our bonding experience turns into a conflict all day. Interesting stat is that 20% of the average adult population, we would say, probably falls in that orange box, the avoidant attachment box. Much higher in the adoptive world. We represent a large portion of that. And those who are in the avoidant box here are looking for a fantasy relationship, that when it comes to parents and kids, they're expecting that every one of their needs will be met all the time, and that they'll feel what they want to feel all the time, and we can't fulfill that, especially when there's this underlying subconscious belief that there are going to be times when you'll just let them down anyway. And so there's this constant tearing that's going on, and so the bonding experience that we want to have becomes a tug of war between who it's for, and then there's this separation. So let's bring it up into the top right corner there, and where we're dealing with a little more anxiety, but this child goes a little bit further than the avoidant one that says, I'm subconsciously believing that there are times when my needs are not going to be met. The anxious or the ambivalent attached child counts on their needs not being met. So they're fully counting all the time that I have to fend for myself. And so there might be a refusal to go somewhere. I don't know if you've probably experienced that from time to time, saying we're going to go here, and then the discussion is nope, we are not going here. And or there might be we're not going to buy that treat. So then there's this battle of wills of I'm showing you that I am going to get it, I'm going to throw a temper tantrum, or they'll take it, or they'll have this big outrageous act at a Father's Day event that you've planned to go together. Remember, we're saying that we've planned this big fun bonding experience thinking this is going to help our relationship, and then this is what you're experiencing. You're thinking, oh my gosh, how did this go so wrong? It's because they've counted on their needs not being met, so they're going to make sure that they are going to be met. And that's why it's important that we would know the triggers and we would know the times, and we may not want to plan bonding events around trigger events. So if we know that Father's Day is a hard day, we might want to back that bonding experience up a little bit and remove some of those trigger experiences. Or somebody had said in the chat, crowds are a real difficult thing. Well, let's not plan bonding experience at Canada's Wonderland. Let's plan bonding experience in a more quiet setting, or something like that, because reality, what happens is that we start to build up hurt feelings, and we start to put protections around ourselves, and our job is to help our kids navigate through these feelings, but sometimes nature is going to win over us, and there's not a lot that we can do. Do you remember, I don't know if you go back to school days, but do you guys remember the fight or flight? You ever heard of it? It's that we get into this fight or flight thing. Well, they've added, the research adds a third level, and it's actually a higher level. Sometimes you can see it on a bell graph curve where it goes up, and fight or flight are in the middle, and then freeze is at the top, where we're just absolutely unable to move or act or function. And what happens is all of our blood rushes to our core to protect what's important. There are times when we can have greater strength, greater speed, and it's actually a very protective physiological thing that's happening in our bodies, where if there is a real threat, so if there was an animal that was there to attack us, there's been stories of when a parent has been able to lift up like heavy objects to save their child, or you're able to outrun things, or like it's a physiological response in our bodies that removes the limiters that we have. So then if we're picking up this heavy thing, we're probably ripping all of our muscles that normally we wouldn't do, our body would stop us from doing. But there is the strength there for in those extreme times. And so the descriptors there are fight, that a person becomes irritable, they lose their temper, defensive,ness, or some people would go into flight, they run away, they avoid anxiety, there's fear, or freeze. There's even there's just the totally detached, numbing experience. So when these things are happening, what we were taught in these experiences are you can't rationalize with somebody who's in fight, flight, or freeze. You have to help them breathe. You have to help them calm down. You have to help their brain start to come out of that mode, because rationalizing just totally goes out the window. There is no brain function in the prefrontal cortex where the rational brain is. It's all in the limbic system, and we're going to get to that in a few moments. But let's put it back to our experience now. Is that if our kids are in one of these areas where there's an avoidant or an anxious attachment, and we're going to talk about fearful in a second here, and we start to rationalize them with, well, this is embarrassing, and we're throwing this temper tantrum. There is no understanding of embarrassing. They're responding based on how they're wired, and so to try and bring the bonding into the attachment can really be one of the most detrimental things that we do. It's not that we don't do bonding, it's that we don't equate the two of them. And we have to say, this is how we have to understand how our kids are attached, and then figure out how we build the bonding experiences within that framework, and do everything that we can to help build the secure attachment. And we're going to talk about how we would do that. But to separate the two can be a very empowering thing to recognize that it's not that when we fail with the bonding experiences, we're doing any kind of damage to our attachments. It's that this is what our attachment is. So now let's see how we build the bonds. And if you're in the fearful category, where you have a child that's fearful or disorganized attachment, that's where we see erratic behavior that's unpredictable, and actually can be a mix of the other three as well. So it becomes, oh, yep.
We have a comment here. Someone's 15-year-old child really fits the anxious type.
Okay.
When it comes to outings, what would you recommend in that case?
From the anxious type, I would ask them what they would feel safe doing, and help them have some power, help them have some control, and saying, what would it look like for you to have a great experience? And I would want to go, and maybe they wouldn't be able to articulate it, but they might be able to articulate what it's not. And so if a great outing experience for them is, well, when we go, I want to be able to buy this and I want to be able to buy that. And you say, then you have to make a decision. You say, well, that's not necessarily how we're going to do that. Would you still want to go have that, or should we look at something else? Or you might just want to say, okay, well, then that's the bonding experience we're going to have, because that's where, that's just how my kid is functioning right now. And within the first few months, that's an extremely difficult journey to navigate, because there is still that you are still in that figuring each other out phase, and there probably is there probably is some real large behaviors that I'm sure you're experiencing.
Are we trying to push our children a little bit outside of their comfort zone, or very much to stay inside it? Or is there a point when we start to push a little bit?
Well, that's one of the ones where I really like to let our kids take the lead and say, I think you might be, I feel that you might be ready for this. This will stretch you a little bit, and I think you can do it. And is a really powerful word, because if you put but in between two sentences, it almost discredits everything you say before the but, right? It's like, I love you, but, oh, well, or I really think you did a great job, but if we, in there, I just use the word but if we use the word and, I think you did a great job, and here's a few things that you need to do better. This is going to be a challenging experience, and here's how we're going to make sure that you can get there. And if the kids are still at the point saying, I don't think that I can, well, maybe they're telling you right up front, they're not ready for that. I remember in our first year as a family, one of the biggest advice that we had is that your home is a trip right now. like they've never been to your home, they've never been to your grocery store, they've never been to, and depending on the age of the child, obviously, and the experience of the child, obviously, there's it varies, but in the first number of months, every time you do anything new, it's a brand new experience that's full of anxiety, full of unknowns, and so much of the bonding experiences really could be, and Eric, I think I saw you write that down, saying that, yeah, it's the low-key outings that he seems to participate with a little more, and it's because there's so much big and new and different, and so it removes some of the anxiety around the experience, if at least the thing that you're doing is really low key, because how you're going to react, how different family members, what people are going to think, how people in your community react and respond, all these things are totally unknown. So that's a great question.
Thanks.
Yeah. So how do we react and respond? Because really what happens is there's damage that's done to our emotional psyche. And it makes us want to slow down how hard we're investing when we're planning all these bonding experiences and we feel like we're failing. And it's important to be real with that, with who's ever in your circle, your friends, your family, the people that are supporting you through it. It's important to be honest with yourself about that, because your feelings are going to be hurt. You're going to have this bit of defeated feeling. And we're in the next section, we're going to talk about building empathy and how feeling identification is a huge part of that. But the critical thing that we can't do is we can't close off to our kids. We can't confirm their belief that they're not going to be cared for. Anything that we do that actually reaffirms that, see, I knew that you weren't going to care for my needs, really can set us back a few steps. Having it as a slow process is absolutely fine. Just saying, you know what, today didn't go as well as I thought it would. Yeah, my feelings are a little bit hurt. So we're gonna take some quiet time tonight, and then we're gonna try again tomorrow. I love you. My feelings are hurt. So I think we should pick that conversation up tomorrow so we can plan how we can do better next time. That's an okay conversation because you've been very real. You've been very open. But there's the proof that next time or tomorrow, it isn't like, well, I don't know when we'll do this again. When everything within us is saying, why would I ever plan another trip when you just did that? What we're demonstrating is a different kind of love, where it's a love that's not earned. It's a love that they don't run out of chances, and that even when there's hurt, we can absolutely repair. And so that's why it's so important to keep bonding and attachment separate, because if we think that they're one and the same, we are setting really what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up for hurt. So first take.
Yeah. So you're showing your constant love there and your constant support, but you're kind of upset at the same time. The big day that you planned has gone horribly wrong. So how do you keep calm in moments like that?
You bite a hole through your lip. From my perspective, the awareness, the information is the power. And saying that, no, it wasn't selfishness that blew it up. It was the assurity that there are times when I have to fight for my own needs. And so I have to continue. Somebody has to check me, because let me tell you, like, as calmly as I'm talking now, I can blow my top, and then I have to go back and apologize to my daughter. She'll say, what happens when Dad's mad? Well, he yells. that's my failing. And so to keep calm is a huge win, and to be able to then, even when we have failed, to come back and say, you know what, I messed up, and I need you to forgive me. And we have to demonstrate that. So the best way to stay calm is to have the perspective of, why are they responding this way? Well, because it's been proven, and their life frame is that if I don't advocate for my own needs, at times they will not be met, and horrible things could happen, because that is true. And that is their perception, and that is their reality. So, great question, though. So we need to demonstrate that kind of care, that kind of love. And thankfully, your child is going to go through different phases of brain development where things will get rewired. And that's what we're going to talk about as we move into our second section, is that there are multiple times in a child's phase where their brain is literally being rewired. So we want to take advantage of every one of those opportunities that we have, and remind ourselves that we're not in full control of attachment. It is actually a shared pathway. So first one, if people have any questions on that, I'll take them now, or if you need a little stretch break, half an hour. All right. So our second thought of evening is that although it's a shared pathway, and that our kids do have to take the lead sometimes, the second one is we need to always be confident that we really can make a significant impact on our kids' attachment. So good to have an understanding of the origin of a thought. Thinking is going for a run. Yeah, I hear you. I'm a runner too. It absolutely calms me down. so, so the origin of a thought. We take in information from the world. We take in stimulus from the world. They come through our eyes, our nose, our ears, and then we all know it's connected spinal cord, and it goes up to our brain, and then we're going to start processing all of these experiences, processing the information we get from the world. So there is something that there's a lot of research has been coming out lately. It's called automatic thoughts and down-up or up-down thinking. And I want to describe this a little bit for you tonight. There's the three phases of the brain that I'm going to point out, or the three sections of the brain that I want to highlight. There's the reptilian brain, which is the instinctual. It's the stuff that just kind of keeps us alive. Like we breathe, we digest, the processes that are going on in our body that we don't have to think about, and they're just kind of happening. And then that's your spinal cord coming up, and then you see the limbic brain. Well, that's the emotions and that's the feeling part of the brain. And if you ever hear the concept of down-up thinking, this is what it's talking about. It's talking about, are you thinking from the bottom section of your brain, your limbic section, and then it's going up to the rational brain, and you've kind of, I start from the bottom. Or are you doing up-down, where you are letting the rational thinking brain take in charge, and then you let the emotion get attached to it. So in the limbic brain, you've got I'm hungry, I'm scared, I love this, I hate that. And it's where adolescents live. It's where a lot of kids live. And it's definitely where a lot of kids who are in that anxious or avoidant attachment sections live. And the interesting thing is, if you look at this, just really, I mean, it happens simultaneously almost, but a fraction of a second before an experience gets to the cortex, the thinking part of the brain, it's already passed through the limbic part of the brain. So in actuality, you can't have a rational thought without a feeling already being attached to it. So when you see something, it passes through the reptilian part, the instinctual part. There's not a lot that gets attached there. Then it passes through the emotional limbic system. Then it gets to the cortex. So you have an emotion around a logical thought every time. You can't separate the two of them. So what we need to start to do is, how do we can train ourselves, and we can train our kids. And Valerie, you're asking this, like, so how do we stay calm? Well, it's the second thought. We need to train ourselves to use that part of the brain, and especially train our kids and our teens to start using that cortex part of the brain, which is extremely difficult because in adolescence, it's the second biggest change of life. The first one, of course, when we're being wired for the first time. So when we go from the embryo and we grow and we're actually just forming all these things in our body. The next biggest change is during adolescence. And any of you that have teenagers know that there's probably not a lot going on in the thinking rational part of the brain. This is why we see kids. I don't know if your daughter's still there, Valerie. There's not, or I shouldn't say there's not as much activity going on in the cortex as there is in the limbic system. And what we see in adolescence is a lot of very risky behaviors. It's why kids they excess on drugs and alcohol. They're racing cars when they get in them. They're jumping off of things and doing all kinds of really risky stuff, not ever thinking about it, because that whole part of the brain is being rewired, which in some ways is a fantastic thing, because that gives us an opportunity to teach our kids how to use that. In other ways, it's a crazy, frustrating thing, because our kids are living on emotions and feelings. And the way that I like to, when I'm working with people on a very basic system, is I bring them to the issue of a snake. And for some of you, I just threw that picture on screen and you're terrified now. You're like, why would you put that picture on screen? But the thing is that for some people, snakes are very fearful things. They are dangerous. We have to protect ourselves when we have to protect other people from snakes. For other people, Snakes are pets. Snakes are things that they like to touch. There's a guy that lives in our neighborhood that we used to walk around this park and lake, and he used to take his pet snake for a walk, and the kids would all, well, let's go pet the guy, go pet the snake. And it was the weirdest thing. But it's the same snake. So some people are running, and some people are having this as their beloved pet. So what we know is it's not the snake that's the problem. It's how we experience the snake. It's the thoughts and the feelings that we have around the snake that are the problem. It's not the actual snake, because if we have identified that isn't an actual threat. So why are we treating it as a threat? Well, it's because of our brain. It's because we've attached an emotion to it, and so then we have all of these responses. So if I'm going to treat somebody who is dealing with a real basic phobia like that, and I like to use it as a real practical one, because then we can understand the concept, and then we can kind of broaden it out, because most of us probably aren't in this webinar because our kids have fears of snakes. But what I would do is I would say, well, let's look at pictures of snakes first. So I'd say, so let's look at the snake. What is fearful about this snake? Well, I don't like that its tongue is forked. Like, okay. This is just an image, remember, like there's no fear that you can have. So are you okay seeing an image of the forked tongue? Okay, yeah. And it's got those weird eyes, and I don't like the way it curves, and something like that. So we'll talk about it, but then what we'll do is we'll have the rational thought. We say, well, I have a feeling that the forked tongue is creepy. Well, tell me about that, because this might not even be a real picture. What if this is just an artist's rendition? So somebody just drew this. So it really can't harm us. So then we're using our rational brain to say, oh, well, this isn't even a real snake. This is actually just a drawing. So now I don't have the fear associated. When I flip it on screen, we still have an emotional response, but it's the secondary thought. The automatic thought was fear. The secondary thought, the top-down thinking is, this is just an image that somebody drew. I have less fear around it. Okay. So now our next step would be, well, let's go expose ourselves to a snake that's behind glass. Let's go to the zoo, and there are snakes behind glass. So the rational thought is there, well, there's no way that the snake can get me. It's this massive, thick panel. So there's still something about a live snake that brings this emotion out of me, but now we can talk through the rational. If I'm protected by this glass, then I really don't have that fear. And we go step by step when a person is ready. And actually what we do is, here's a little tool that you might want to bring into when you're planning, how do we go out on trips and avoid these kinds of big acts, and when they're acting out, whether it's tantrums or fighting or anything like that. I make somebody make a list of 1 to 10 and go, what would be the most terrifying thing? Well, it would be to hold the snake or have it wrapped around my head or something like that. So, okay, so that's a 10. What's a 1? A 1 is talking about snakes. Okay, so then let's start somewhere in the middle. So we'll take 10 steps, and then we'll go step by step. And when they feel comfortable at one step, then we'll say, now we're going to try and go to the next step. It'll be scary, and we can do this. And so we do step by step until the place where somebody can go, a snake that isn't poisonous, I can have it crawling on my shoulder, and all of a sudden I'm no longer dealing with the fear of snakes. So let's apply that to our worlds. Our kids are having these emotional outbursts based on the reality of what they've experienced out of their life, based on their attachments. So then we have to say, what is the real difference that I can make? Well, I can have a conversation about what is the threat that you are experiencing. I can teach my kids how to when they're having a panic attack, when they're feeling anxiety, I can teach them some breathing techniques, and I can teach them to start asking the question, what is it that I'm fearful of right now? What do I need to remove myself away from so I'm not feeling this fear? Once they get out of that fight or flight, panic, anxiety attack mode, then we can start saying, what is it that triggered? So was it a real threat, or was it a threat that I is kind of perceived? And as I'm going through this, then I am teaching them the automatic thought isn't necessarily always true. So the automatic thought of, when I mess up, Dad's going to get angry, or when I'm not in control, things go bad. I have to give them experience. I have to give them proof that there are times when the opposite is true, and even the feeling that they're having isn't necessarily always true. Now, here's the crazy thing: is that the automatic thought and feeling will probably never go away. So somebody that is afraid of snakes, they will probably always see this picture and go, ah, but it's the secondary thought that gives them the power.
We have a question here from
Yeah.
Fayaz. Is wondering how you should approach this with children of different ages.
It's the scaling system. It's to go. So what is it that's scary for you, and what is it that you could manage? So like we do this with kids who are fearful of going to school. And we say, so you're fearful of going to school. What is it that you could do? I could go to school if I knew that mom was going to stay for the whole day. I'm like, well, that can't happen. Would you be okay if you could go to school if mom stayed for the first 15 minutes? Yep. I'd be scared when they're ready to go, but you would be okay if we did that. Okay. Or you would be okay if you knew it was going half the day, but you couldn't go the whole day. So we find out where those areas are, and it's just smaller steps really of what's fearful, what's manageable, and what isn't manageable.
And the example that we have here, so Fayez has 3 children, aged between 6 and 12. So maybe if we just took that fear of going to school example. So obviously your 6-year-old, you can tell them like, I'm going to come and sit with you in the class for half an hour. Your 12-year-old's probably not going to be delighted to have you by them. So for different levels of security or...
Well, and so it's really important to know that until pre-adolescence or adolescence, kids don't have the ability to reflect on their thinking. This stuff works much better when they get into the 10 plus range, because a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old might not even tell you why they're afraid. They just are afraid. So you might have to give them the steps and say, could you do that? And oftentimes it's gonna be no. So then what we really are is working on calming down and making our best guess. So how do we differentiate between kids 6 to 12? A 12-year-old can probably help create the steps on their own, or with your support. A 6-year-old, you're probably making the steps, and you're having to do your best guess, and they will let you know when the step was too big, and it will be very clear when you put too much of a step out there. Actually, it's the opposite. My 6-year-old is more expressive than the 12-year-old. So the 12-year-old has the capacity to do it, doesn't mean that they will, because it's probably a very fearful thing to be reflective about their thought. The 6-year-old may be talking away, but they're not reflecting on their thoughts. They are fully in limbic system, just going, like, this is what I feel. Here's what I'm telling you. But it isn't going, oh, was that a feeling or was that a cognitive thought? That function isn't even available to a 6-year-old. And the question on how do I get a 12-year-old to open up? You can. And that's, let's go back to the attachment. We would love to go, if I do this, then my kid will do that. And that's just not the way. Our kids have to set the pace. So we can have an effect, but we can't have control. And so one of the best things we can do is model and just say, so can I tell you how I'm feeling? I'm feeling this, this, and this. And I would say, so sometimes is it easier to write some stuff down for you? And then you ask them, well, how do you get your feelings out? Like, well, I don't think, or I don't want to. Like, would it be easier if we wrote it down? Would it be easier if you told somebody else? Could you record it? Could you draw a picture of how you're feeling? If they're on the artistic type, you can give them all you can model it, you can talk about it. But the one who holds the key is the 12-year-old who's not necessarily ready to talk. And I would find out as best I can why, and say, so what would it take for you to be safe to talk about how you're feeling?
I think with a lot of older children, adolescents, texting or emailing can be a really good way to communicate those difficult things with parents, because there's time to reflect and to make it sound how they want it to sound. Because often a child who's angry and having a tantrum, that's not really what they want to say to you. They still love you. So so if your child has a cell phone, I think that can be a really good thing. You know, you're in the living room, they're in their bedroom, and
Mm-hmm.
you can help diffuse things before you actually come face to face and start talking again.
Absolutely. This is a resource that we have on our fridge, and my wife put it there. And I mean, you can get this. It's anywhere on the internet. This is called the feelings wheel. And one of the reasons why we have it on a fridge is because when we're having a difficult day or week or month or conversation or whatever the case may be, and we don't have words for how we're feeling, we can go to the feelings wheel. And we can go, so if I'm feeling mad, so I'm in that red section. Well, mad is a pretty general word. So let's look at some other feelings that are related to mad that might help me express how I'm feeling. I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling selfish, feeling hate, I'm feeling critical, I'm irritated, I'm frustrated. There's this whole section, piece of the pie there. And you can go through all the different areas there, and we use it to help us journal. We use it to help us have discussions, and we all get it out in different ways in our family. I'm extremely extroverted. I love to talk. My wife is the opposite. She loves to write it out first and get her own thoughts together. My daughter's just kind of figuring her own way out. She's probably more verbal than she is written, and oftentimes not ready to talk about it either. But she has the capacity to. It's a great tool that we can use. And again, what it's doing is giving us the opportunity to model the top-down thinking, to model the second thought, that the first thought that we have isn't always necessarily true or right. And if we can learn to challenge the thoughts and feelings that we're having, then we can help build, we can help defeat the arguments and the realities that are dictating our kids' lives, that are leading to those avoidant and anxious attachments. I think we have another question, Valerie, you're saying.
Yeah, so we have a question here from Adam on Facebook Live. Yeah. So Adam says, I have a 9-year-old that says none of your business whenever he gets into a mood. And you ask him what the problem is, and Adam wants to know if there's a way to break that barrier.
None of your business. So the best way, I mean, I'm just gonna echo it again, but model it for them and say, you know, I've often felt that I don't want to share my feelings, and that there's private stuff that isn't my business, but there, you know, even dads need to make sure that they find somebody that they're sharing their frustrations with, and give an example of a time when you needed to do that, when you have to do it at work, when you have to do it relationally, and say, we all have to do it. We all have to find the people that we're safe for, and we have to figure out why it's not, why we're feeling not safe. And as I was saying, it's one of those ones that we can't force. And I always want to model and I want to be there, but I have to recognize there are times when I'm being shut down. If I go too hard there, I probably am making it harder the next time I want to have the conversation. And my daughter has taught me that. She's saying, Dad, you talk for so long. And now whenever we have a conversation, I'm terrified of having a conversation with you because we talk for too long. So I have to recognize that, oh, I've actually done some damage there. So I have to go back and say, so I'm going to show you that it's going to be a shorter conversation, and it's going to be a quiet conversation. And so then maybe we can go back and have this conversation. So pushing harder definitely has the capacity to really make it harder the next time we want to go back at it.
I did want to ask you something before we move on. So we were talking about how to deal with different situations for children of different ages.
Yep.
One thing I think that can be really difficult at the very beginning is establishing how old your child actually is, because there's of course chronological age and developmental age. Mm-hmm. So do you have any advice for dads who are trying to pitch how they react to their children according to their developmental age?
And we actually are going to deal with that exactly in the last phase, which is threats to bonding with your child. So I'll just touch on it real briefly there. But one of the first threat right off the top is thinking that your child is too old for something, quote unquote, too old. And many of us can remember maybe being told, by our own parents and caregivers that we just need to grow up a little bit. And grow up means stop worrying or fight through, or you can do this, or get past the thing that's keeping you from being successful. And if your kids have never had the opportunity to develop the skill to get through, then maybe they actually don't have the function to get past the thing that's blocking them, and they can't just grow up just because we have determined that at X age they should be able to do that. One of the best things that we can figure out is what kind of traumas our kids have been through. Some of the best therapy that works in, especially with adoptive families, can be trauma-based therapy, because what trauma does is it can lock your brain or your body at a certain age, at a certain functioning, and saying, well, this is the way I work now. And until you go back and unlearn that or relearn a new skill, then you can be functioning, even though you might present to the world that I'm okay this way. When you go back into a time of conflict or hurt, then you're going to go back and you're going to start demonstrating that hurt, or demonstrating that lack when it comes to a safe place. So we really do see this all the times with adoptive kids and parents, because the kids have been through trauma, and it is so important to figure out, my kid is really reacting, even though they're 12 years old, and to their friends they demonstrate as a 12-year-old. When it comes to trust, they really are demonstrating at a 7-year-old level, and I have to the rules of what it would take for a 7-year-old in terms of trust, I have to apply that to my kid. And even though that's hard, and I would say grow up, I have to reteach them and help them unlearn. And that's one of those ones where, again, they have to set the pace and say, well, I'm learning at this level now, and I'm ready to take the next step. And it's one of the most hardest things to do, because we would think, well, why can't you just? And it's because we are applying the rules of a securely attached person to the rules of an anxiously attached person that's been through a trauma. And it just doesn't work. So having that kind of understanding. But great question, Valerie. And look, it led right into it. Perfect. The second thing I would say in terms of threats to bonding with our kids is failing to risk our own feelings. Vulnerability is one of the most important qualities that we can demonstrate to anyone when we're building attachments. So showing somebody else that we need them, and I trust you with my heart, with my life, can be a very powerful tool. And sometimes we start to build up the same kind of walls that we're experiencing from our kids because we've been hurt now. And one of the things that we've been talking about with our daughter more recently is that adoption isn't just the kid's story. Adoption's our story as well. And we've invested hopes and dreams, and we have understandings of what it means. And so we invest just as much in her as she invests in us. And so we have to care for each other's hearts and feelings with that same kind of entrustment. And we're at that stage where we can do that now. We're 9 years into the journey together, 9 years into familyhood together. So we can kind of have those understandings. So obviously you'd have to figure out if that's an appropriate conversation depending on your kid and your relationship with them. But some kind of vulnerability is such an important thing to feel, because it builds empathy. And sometimes if you're an anxiously attached person who is pretty convinced that there are going to be times when it's not going to be safe, it's hard to take, and almost impossible to be empathetic and really be feeling for the other person and trying to feel what the other person's feeling. So you've got to be so explicit with, well, this is how I'm feeling, and when you do this, this is how I feel, and to try and draw the linear pathway between, when this happens, this is really how I feel, and I want to feel that way with you. So can we make an adjustment so that we can both have a great feeling and bonding experience as we go out to do this thing. But that takes vulnerability. And
Kind of a balancing act, I think, between being Zen but not being neutral, right? Like you
yeah,
still have to feel and you still have to model how to feel.
yeah.
And also, I think that, you know, as part of love, if your child is pushing your buttons, they want to see that it works a little bit. Because if you're completely immune to any button pushing, then do you actually care?
No, yeah, no, because that isn't, yeah, that's not the way relationships work. And what we're trying to do is demonstrate positive relationships and
Yeah.
real relationships, right? I pulled this quote from Brandy Brush, and she says, when we are willing to expose our delicate self, the person that we are deep down within the pit of our soul, and make it safe for others to do the same. And when others expose their delicate self along with us, true connections are born, and they develop and multiply like wildfires. It spreads in the forest on a hot summer's day in the middle of a drought. And it's a beautifully painted picture. It doesn't always happen that way. But they're really, vulnerability has the capacity to do some amazing things. So it's finding the right ways and finding the right times and finding the right pathways for our kids. And the last one that we have, threats to bonding with your child, is failing to listen to what your child is really saying that they need from you. Sometimes we can be so gung-ho on getting to the next level, getting to the next step with our kids, that we stop listening to what they're saying. They're saying, "Dad, I love you. I just really hate when we go do this together," or "Dad, I need you to give me some space," or "Dad, I love spending time together, but I want to do what I want to do, but I want you to do it with me, but I want to do this." Or when you yell, "I'm really scared," or when you write it out and say what you're proud of me, that really makes a difference in my day. Sometimes we forget to listen because we get so focused on, I got to get this and I got to get to this next level. And there are times in the adoptive journey when we feel like, well, our kids are a little bit behind and they're catching up. But there's also times when our kids, they've learned more and they've seen more in their lives than other kids. So they're actually more advanced, and they are able to know exactly what they need and what they don't need. And so we have to become great listeners and to make sure that our drive and our striving to make these great experiences don't actually become the limiter from us having the great experiences, because we haven't been able to hear our kids because we've been so focused on getting through what we planned to get through. And so stopping to hear our kids is of critical importance. So we are at 9:32, and we did actually make through everything. So I hope that you found the information part of the webinar beneficial, and that we remember to keep bonding and attachment two separate thoughts in our minds, and that we know that our kids are going to fall into one of those categories. So we have to treat them as they are. But then also remember that we do have a big part to play, that we need to model for our kids what it looks like to have a second thought, and that that we may function this way, but we can have a second thought and we can get past some of our fears, and that we can identify some of the things that we may be doing that are kind of inhibiting the bonding experiences that we're having. So thank you so much, and great participation. And I'll just kind of hang out online here and we can moderate some questions. And but if you need to check out, thanks again. Have a great evening, and we'll see you somewhere online.
Yep, that was really awesome, Rick. Thank you. I have a question for you to get the ball rolling, and I encourage you, I'm keeping an eye on Facebook Live to my right, and also on our chat box, our Q&A box. So if you have any specific questions that you came here this evening hoping to get answered, please get the ball rolling. Rick, I'm wondering what for you was the biggest challenge that first year when you were trying to build an attachment with your child?
It was not taking it personally.
Yeah.
Because it was the feeling of, well, don't you know what we could have if we would if we could just calm it all down? Like this really should be like, we just planned some great things, and I put so much effort in today. I am exhausted with how hard I have been working, and now you're gonna act this way or say something like this or do this in public or something. It was learning to not take it personally. And so I mean, I had the benefit that I'm married, and my wife took the first 3 or 4 months, and she took that off as parental leave, and then she is a teacher, so she had the summer off, and I took 3 months off. So I took the end of May and June and right up through July and August off. So then we were all off together. And so I had a constant support, and we would probably take turns going back and forth, reminding each other, don't take it personally. We're this experience. Just somebody constantly in each other's ear. But yeah, and 9 years in, and we're still having that conversation. It's not only the first year, it's still a conversation we have, but just to be mindful of that there are some things that we are just not in control of, and each that we have to continue to demonstrate the right kind of love in the right kind of way, and kids are kids, and everybody's unique, and that this just layers on a whole nother thing. So there are gonna be times where we just can't take it personally.
Yeah, I met a parent in a class I was taking who told me that in the transitional months they had written on a post-it note, "You are the grown-up." And they stuck it in the closet, and anytime they were getting really frustrated, they would go and stand in the closet and take some deep breaths and just remind themselves not to get like sucked into the tantrum.
Oh, it's so true.
We do have a question here, which came in right at the start. So I'm going to read this out to you, Rick. I'm not able to stay for the whole webinar, but I'd love to get some input. My children are more attached to me, Dad, than my wife. We know why, previous experiences with birth mom, but it's still very hard on my wife. How can I support my wife with this? They've been with us for 8 years. There's been big steps in their bond, but there's a clear difference in their attachment from me to mom.
Wow.
Painful.
It is, and definitely, I mean, you see that in every family, right? That where we can see kids that are closer, and they have just personality-wise or whatever, they connect with one parent. If there's 2 parents in the family, where they connect with one parent better than the other, and it's you don't want to damage your own attachment with your kids by saying, well, it's either both of us or one. But really, our kids do need to see if there's a marriage relationship or a couple relationship there, they need to see that can't be touched, and that we're seen as a unit, and say, so anything that's hurtful towards mom or I or dad or I, then that can be really hurtful to me too. So it's the same principle of being open and saying, well, here's what happens to my feelings and my experience when I see that, and can we talk about how we can have the second thought? And I mean, the question was, why you're able to identify it's with past caregivers, and it's very common. But the only thing that we can do is say, so how do we make sure that we're not transferring those feelings onto mom now, and saying it's okay that you have that thought. It's normal that you have that thought. Everybody gets it, but how do we make sure that that it's not being put forward, because we know that that's not and age appropriate. If the kid's 6 or 7, impossible to have that conversation. They've got to be at the stage where they can reflect on their feelings. Again, that starts in like pre-adolescence and through teenage years, but that's a tough one. And it is when you just have to kind of go through until they get to the place where they can have those deeper feelings.
Yeah, maybe to an extent you have to make peace a little bit with that after a certain number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And at what point do you think that you would want to shift the conversation with a child who was maybe transferring emotions for a past caregiver onto a present caregiver? Like, at what point would you be explicit about that? Like, you know, this is your mom.
Yeah.
She didn't do
I
that, or
mean,
do you not want to go there?
well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. We have to recognize their emotional age and where they're functioning. So it depends on the conversation, on their level of comfort. So I think probably most of us have different levels of openness with birth families, and so there's obviously some discussion that goes on there, if not contact. So we can be if that's a regular topic of conversation, then it's a lot easier to have that conversation. And if you really just don't ever have conversations about that, then yeah, that's probably not the place to bring it up. So it just does depend on to me, if the child's functioning at an adolescent age, 12, 13, 14, emotionally they're there, and you have that regular conversation between, well, what's the difference between birth family and our forever family here? So we can talk about those two differences and say, well, this is why this is different. So yeah, but that is one that it's so individualized. So you'd have to be able to make that call with your own comfort level and what you're already having or not having.
And in terms of how a husband can take care of their partner emotionally, you know, we've spoken a lot about strengthening the bond between a dad and kids. What about between spouses? If all this mayhem is going on with the kids, how do you keep that bond strong?
Empathy. Listen to what the other one's feeling. Like because really all of these concepts we're talking about, like identifying feelings and automatic thoughts, and I mean, it's just it's the basis for good relationships is what it is really. So that you continue to have the empathy for each other. Okay, so this is what you're feeling, and I'm not going to tell you that that's not how you're feeling. And even though I'm seeing it differently, or I'm getting a different experience with them, then it's still not okay, and I'm not okay with that. So let's find a way that we can, like, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way, or that I'm sorry that you're experiencing that, and let's find a way that we can talk about it as a family. So yeah, the empathy is huge, to be able to come in and join in with the hurt on both sides. You can do that with your kids, but and then with the spouse too, that you can go like, I'm going to join you in this hurt, and then we're going to take it on together. It's actually one of the things that we work with when it's just conflict. We recognize that in most conflicts we see, well, you're on one side, you're on the other side, and the conflict's in the middle. Visually you go, no, we're on the same side, and we are taking this conflict on together. And I'll even physically move people at times and just say, so let's put you in on the same side, let's move and go, and let's put the conflict here and go, and recognize, okay, we're coming at it from a different, we have a different sight of why this conflict is here, but it's not between us. We are connected, and we're going to take this conflict on together. We're going to figure out how we can deal with it. So
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, between spouses, the idea of being a team and being a we is so valuable, but even it's something that we can promote within our family, with our kids. So, you know, if you're at loggerheads, it's not who's going to win this. It's like, how are we gonna get through this? I have another question, and it's about post-adoption depression. It's a topic that has a lot of stigma around it, both for men and for women. But it's one of the reasons why a lot of parents find Adopt4Life in the first place and look for support. So do you want to just talk a little bit about what the symptoms like that might be for a dad, and some of the strategies you recommend for getting through that and for parenting through depression?
Sure. The generalized depression, and we can go into the post-adoption part in a minute, but the generalized depression is when you start to when things start to feel like things that should be normal and good and exciting are no longer normal, good and exciting. So let's put so then we put it into the adoptive phase, and we look at it where like, oh, what's happened? I don't have the excitement, I don't have the passion that I thought I would. And for a lot of men, when I'm talking with men, there's the question of, what did I do? Why did I do this? I'm not going to, I can't be the dad that I'm supposed to be for this child. I've been told that I'm not the dad that this child wants. I don't have the motivation to take it on. I can't be in it. So what do we do? That's probably a place where when we're dealing with post-adoption depression, where we need to seek out support and where we need to have space. So for some people, it's a professional therapy relationship. For some people, it's finding a group like us at Adopt4Life and saying, maybe there's a dad that I can just talk with, because every one of us has those thoughts. It's whether those thoughts dominate our experiences and our feelings every day. So a diagnosis of depression is just the symptom is there. Enough symptoms are there and present for at least 3 weeks. And it's starting to affect our relationships, our work, our health, and things like that. But it's one of the ones that where we just need to identify and go, okay, everyone will have these feelings. So what do I do when I have that thought? And it's the exact same thing. Is that we're going to challenge the initial thoughts that we have, and we're going to say, is there a second reality that I could actually look at and go, so I have the feeling like I'm not good enough, I'm not going to be able to do this, and say, well, what are the times when I have been good enough? What are the resources that I can have that I can get better at this? What are the experiences that discredit the feeling that I'm having? So find someone that can ask you those questions, whether it's a professional relationship or whether it's just a friendship relationship. Ask yourself those questions and begin to challenge those feelings that you have, but recognize them. As Valerie was saying, that's a lot of the reason why people can find a group like this, going, just recognizing, wow, I can't do this on my own, or this is harder than I thought it was. And so be okay with that and begin to challenge the thoughts and feelings that you're having.
Another thing that can come up quite often, another reason why people find our group, is often because increasingly a couple are out of step with each other. One was maybe more keen to adopt than the other, or once the adoption has happened, as we saw in the earlier question, one spouse is bonding really well, the attachment's going great, having a lot of fun, and the other one is, the gulf is slowly growing between two people, and it's very painful to try and figure out how to support someone when you're having like two very different experiences. So what would you recommend in that case?
That's where you do the exact same thing what you would do for yourself. You do it with each other. And the most challenging thing that breaks down relationships is lying. I don't want to use the word lying about your feeling, but you know what I mean. It's not being real with the thoughts that you're having, and the thoughts you're having, like, I'm having regrets that we did this. I'm feeling like I'm not loved as much. I'm not feeling love from you, or I'm not feeling love from our kids as much as you are, and just getting those making a safe arena to have those conversations and not be terrified of what the results might be. And that's a big thing, because safety might look different for different groups of people. Like if you've never had those kind of real conversations as a spouse before, I'd recommend that you do that in a professional environment where there's a counselor or a psychotherapist or somebody there that can help navigate those conversations. But it's so important that we make time and space in every one of our relationships to get out real feelings. And sometimes that's a draining process and a tiring process. And you're like, well, why do we have to talk about everything? But it's because we have these thoughts. And so I have to figure out what we're going to do with those thoughts, because those are the ones that will eat away and just end up destroying relationships. Because because we feel guilty about it, or because we feel selfish. You could say, well, how could I be having this thought when we've just taken in this kid who was not having any kind of stability and at home when they were needing a family, and they came here, and now I'm about to say I don't like what it's done, or I don't like what it's done to me. I don't like what it's done to us. There's that feeling of how could I say that? But if the feeling's there, then we have to talk about where that feeling stemmed from, and like, let's go back to the origin of the thought and go, why am I feeling this way? What is different? What would I need to make this a safe, good place again? And what are the boundaries that we need to establish as a couple and as a family? So if you can do that on your own, then do it on your own. But if you need for some couples that they just haven't had the pattern of having those real vulnerable, exposed, raw thoughts. So then sometimes those are best had in a counseling environment, just because then there's someone to help give context and moderate it.
Yeah, especially I think if both people are in pain at the same time, it's hard to
right.
That's one's own feelings and then also support the other person. I'm wondering as well for dads, how you would recommend creating a support network, particularly of other dads. So people who it might be comfortable to talk about some of these difficult things.
Yeah.
If it's not comfortable, how do you bring it up? How do you make it comfortable?
Well, I think like on our Facebook group, we don't use it enough, but somebody will just throw out a thought, and somebody will have a feeling, because we know that on the Facebook group, there's people having it every day. Like, somebody's having a thought every day. So I try and make it a habit to stop by every few days and see, is there anybody having a thought or a feeling or an experience, and can we say anything? And but that it is vitally important to find a group, or at least one other guy that we can talk to, or one other person that can empathize with us. Over the years, I've just seemed to have naturally been able to, like, when you find someone else that's in the adoption journey, it's so like, oh, you get it, and it's so good just to go have those conversations. At times, we were funny story. We were out, we were with friends this weekend, and two of the there's one of the couple that has an adopted child there, and two of the girls had to go off and they had to pick something up at the store or something. They said, oh, we'll go. And they had been gone for half an hour. And we're like, I think they went for coffee. I don't think they just went to pick something up. But they were having a moment, because they were just like, I found someone, and one of them was going through something, and they said, okay, we need to have that conversation. And so, yeah, if you need it, just flat out ask on the Facebook group. That's why we're here. That's why we have the supports. But be open about it, and be okay to say, I'm struggling and I'm not doing well with this, and recognize that we should expect that we will all have challenging seasons really for the rest of our lives, because every time our kids go through another phase, when they're going to early childhood, when they go into adolescence, when they become a young adult, when they think about marriage, when they think about kids, they're going to reprocess all of their life. We all do that. We all reprocess the big transformational experiences in our lives every time we go through a life milestone. And so they'll do it, and we'll get some of that hurt thrown our way. And so we're going to need people that we can debrief with on that. So you've got to have those supports.
Okay, we have a question here from Fayaz. Sometimes our children don't feel like opening up at a certain time, but because you're out somewhere, when is the best time to come back to a particular issue?
Make a rhythm of when you talk. Just say, so on Saturday mornings, if that works for you, or Wednesday evenings, or whatever, you have a regular place where we go, this is where we get time to talk. And maybe you can't do it as a family, so maybe, because I remember you saying you have 3 kids, so you guys are busy, and so maybe you find a different time with each child, and if you have two parents, then you can have 1-on-1 or whatever, but just have a regular rhythm to when you get stuff out and when you have time to talk, because if it only comes up in when something bad has happened or when there's something big that has happened, then those are terrifying conversations then. But if they know, if everybody has the expectation that on Saturday mornings we have half an hour and we just talk about our weeks and what we've done and what were the big things, what were the things we need to change, it's so much easier because then sometimes it's just good conversation. Sometimes, well, we have to bring this up too, but it just becomes a regular part of your rhythm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that for many people that's during car journeys, so to sports practice or school. Obviously you don't want to have those big conversations on the way to school and then dump the kids off, but
Here you go.
if often it's easier not to have to look each other in the eye, but to be forward, engaged in something.
Especially with a teenager in the car is the best place to have a conversation.
And I've also seen some families who have rituals at dinner time. So tell me 3 things that you're grateful for that happened today. Tell me 1 thing that sucked today. And so the children, they know these questions are coming, and it doesn't always have to be a huge thing or a very emotionally intense thing. Some days it's going to be, I didn't like my snack, or but they know that those opportunities are going to come up every day and that those conversations can be had.
Absolutely.
We have another question. What kind of leading questions can you use to get your child to open up? Like asking them how their day went doesn't work. So I use other types of questions. What technique do you use, Rick?
Tell me about a time when blah, blah, blah. Tell me about a time when you felt excited today. Tell me about a time when you were challenged today. Scale your day. Scaling questions are great because then on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your day? And then like we used to have that pattern where there was just a little journal and we all had to write down how our day was and just a couple of things that made it that way. And exactly like Valerie, you just said, where that way, like lots of days it was a 7 because I got rained on, or it was a 4 because I got rained on. It was a 7 because somebody shared this with me today, and so it's not even a big thing. But then when it is a big thing, then it's in the natural rhythm, and the scaling, like the framework is already there. That we know that it's that you've got to say you got to share something about what happened, because if you just say, "Do you have a good day?" Yep. Nope. That's all it's going to be.
I think that the scaling is so important for our kids as well, especially because it kind of goes back to the limbic brain. And, when our children have a history of trauma and of big, big things, the reactions can be mad, sad, happy, like quite simple. But when we have the scaling, it means that you can get to those different grades of those emotions, and you can distinguish between the type of sadness you're feeling. Is it grief? Is it depression? Is it mildly annoyed? So I think I like the skill. I'm going to do a quick wrap up and just mention a few of the things that we can provide for you at Adopt4Life, and then I'm going to pass back to Rick to finish up. So as we mentioned, I know that some of you are not registered with Adopt4Life, but if you live in Ontario, we have supports for awaiting parents, for people who are just thinking about the adoption process and getting started, and also for adoptive parents, kin caregivers. So that might be father figures in the sense of granddads or uncles who are raising a child, customary caregivers. And we're peer support based model. So we have different Facebook groups where parents can talk about anything, day or night. Had a bad day, you can go and ask for some advice, something to celebrate, you can tell us about it. And because everyone in our community has lived experience, you're going to find some of the best advice that you can get there. Everyone in our team has different areas of expertise. So if you need one-on-one counseling or support, that's available for you. We do advocate as well. So if for example, you need to set up an educational plan at your child's school, or if you have a meeting with the Children's Aid Society and you need to have an ally, somebody to help you prepare for that, then that's an area where we can help. And lastly, something that could be really valuable, we have a buddy and mentor system. So if you're feeling a little bit stuck, or if you're right at the start of the process and you want somebody who's a little bit further ahead than you, who can help talk about what their experiences were, then we can match you with a mentor and they can kind of lead you through the process. Or you might want a buddy, so someone who's maybe adopted at around about the same time, who lives local to you, whose children may be around the same age. We'll again look for similarities that are important to you, and then having that connection. It's always good if you need to vent, or if you need to share, or if you need to ask a question. You have your buddy, you can send a text, get on the phone, go for coffee. So if you want to have access to some of those things, our website's adopt4life.com. Scroll down on the home page, join our community button, and we can get the process started. We also have a dads group, which we'd love to see getting more active. But that's a really good place if you have questions or comments, or things that you want to share where you want to do it with other dads and just keep it small. So I'm going to say a huge thank you to Rick. I think that was really valuable, and we had some really good questions coming in. So thanks to everyone who participated in the live stream and everyone who registered on Zoom. Rick, I'm going to give you the final word before we finish up here.
Again, I want to express my thanks to you, Valerie, for moderating, and to everyone who came in and tuned in tonight. And if you did have any follow-up questions, I'm on the Facebook group, and I'm there, and I'm more than happy to follow up. And if you're even in the area, I would even offer myself to. I'm in kind of West GTA areas, so be more than happy to connect with anyone, because we're in the journey together, and we are a big community. And so I love to be able to have those kinds of connections. And if we're not in the same area, we can just connect on Facebook somehow. So thanks so much, and I hope that hope everybody has a great evening, and we continue strengthening our bonds. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.